We're now on Daf Ayin Daled Amud Beis. Lo kami boile. I have no doubt that this lav that prohibits the zar also includes the Kohen, but ki kami boile lav de kolil tia. My. We're talking about menachos, and specifically those menachos that have to be kulei kolil, that have to be burnt. And now the Kohen went ahead and he ate the imurim. And the Torah says, Kol tia lo seachel. Does the Kohen now violate that law? Omar of Aaron Levino, Toshma Desanya, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer Kol Shehu Bekol Tia, any case where the Torah says that the carbon has to be completely, the mincha has to be completely burned, then Lite Lo Tasal Achilaso, the Torah says Lo Seachel, which means that there's a lav v'achila. So since the emurim have to be burnt on the mizbeach, it's also included in this lav. And that would apply to a Kohen as well as a non-Kohen. Okay, now we're up to the Mishnah here on Daf Ayin Daled Amud Beis. Now we're going to have a list in the Mishnah of all kinds, all sorts of categories of menachos that don't require kmitza. Number one, minchas kohanim, right? Because the minchas kohanim of Nedava, or for that matter, minchas chote, which is a chova, there's no kmitza. Again, this is the Rabbanan sheet. Minchas Kohen Mashiach, right? So that's going to be the Minchas Chavitim, which is brought once, half in the morning, half in the afternoon by the Kohen Gadol. And that too is Kulei Kolil. Well, Minchas Nesachim, right? Every time you bring a Karban Shlomim or a Karban Ol, it has to be accompanied by Niskei Yayin and also by a Mincha. And that's called Minchas Nesachim, which is Kulei Kolil, completely burnt. So here we give preference to the Mizbeach, and the Achila is dedicated to the Mizbeach, and the Kohanim get no Achila whatsoever. It's Kulei Kolel. Now we flip it around, and now we're going to find a Koach that's greater for the Kohanim. And that's in Shtei Alechem V'Lechem Aponim. Mizbeach gets nothing in these two cases. Nechol Mekohanim Vein Lem Mizbeach Ubazei Yofa Kohen, Koach Kohen, and Mikoach HaMizbeach. So Gemara is going to try to understand why the Mishnah had to formulate these Yofa Koach this and Yofa Koach that. First of all, the Gemara wants to know Visu Leka, are you giving me an exhaustive list of all the karbanos that are Kulei Kolil? What about a karban Ola? Vayika Ola? And the answer is that an Ola is not Kulei Kolil, which is something that we never focused on, and that is Ika Ora L'Kohen, right? The hides are given to the Kohen. Va'ika Ola Sa'of, that's Kulei Kol, it's completely burnt. Ika Mura'a V'Notza, right? So these are deposited, these crops and feathers that are not entirely burnt, that are not burnt on the Mizbeach, but they're put next to the Mizbeach. And that's called a Makom Adeshin. Next, for Ika Nesachim, right? We pour the Nesachim totally on the Mizbeach. Why didn't you mention that as Yofa Koach HaMizbeach? And the answer is L'shitin Azle. That even though you pour it on the Mizbeach, but then it goes down to the Shitim, and the Yayin of the Nesachim, after being poured into one of two bowls, which are attached to the top of the Mizbeach on the southwest corner, each bowl has a spout at its base, through which the wine runs onto the surface of the Mizbeach and then drains from there through a hole in the Mizbeach's top into a deep cavity beneath the altar, which is called Shisen. And since the wine's final destination is not on the Mizbeach, the Mishnah doesn't include it amongst those karbanos that have kulei kolil that are completely consumed on the Mizbeach. Umay bazu, why are you telling me that here the Mizbeach has Yofa Koach Mikoach HaKohanim, Lafukim in a Shmuel? So I don't know exactly how Shmuel is going to answer this question, but Shmuel's the one who says that hamisnadev yayin mevir mezalfa al gabi isha. That if a person takes upon himself a voluntary nisuch hayayin, then you pour the yayin directly onto the mizbeach. And therefore, it should be another case that would have been listed in the Mishnah as Yafa Kocha Mizbeach. But the answer is Kamashvan Dilishisin Oze. We don't accept Shmuel's opinion that the Kohen just sprinkles all the yayin onto the eish, which is called ziluf, which is, by the way, neged to this week's parsha, because the Torah says lo yichber, and l'chora, when according to Shmuel, when you pour the yayin on the mizbech, there's going to be a kibui. It's going to extinguish the fire. Okay, that's not for us. That's a sugya in zvachim. But anyway, kol mashlo del shisin, that we're going to exclude the shita of Shmuel, and we're going to hold that the wine goes down to the shisin. Next. Now, what happened to Shemen? Shemen is not mentioned at all in the Mishnah. Messiah, this is going to be a support for Shmuel, because Shmuel says, "Hamisnadev Shemen komto v'shirov necholim." So, in other words, if you bring in a dova of donating oil for the mizbeach, then it's not going to be completely burnt on the mizbeach. Therefore, it doesn't, according to Shmuel, it doesn't appear in this list in the Mishnah, the ratio of the Mishnah, because he holds his kmitza and shirov. There's no kmitza in yayin, but there's kmitza in shemen. I guess shemen has a certain thickness that you could do the kmitza. Now we shift over to the sefer of the Mishnah. Visu leka. Are these the only times that the Kohen gets everything? Right? In Chatas Ha'of, the entire bird is given over to the Kohen. And where it says, no, it's not exactly the entire bird, because because the dam requires mitzi adam on the mizbeach. So that's not given to the Kohanim. And the log shemen and mitzora has to be given to the Kohanim. Now it's true, the Mizbeach doesn't get anything from the log shemen or the mitzora, but ika matnosov, but there's a din of hazoy al gabi paroches, so some of the oil will go under the paroches. Okay. Umay bazu. So again, why did the Mishnah have to emphasize that this is the koach yofer of the Kohanim? Lafuki miman diyomer shtei lechem abos b'fnei atzma l'sreifa asya. So what's the case? Normally, the shtei lechem is brought with the kvasim, and according to one man diomar, there's such an entity as bos b'fnei atzman, which I think means that the kivsei atzeres were lost. Let me just see if he points this out. He says that the lambs are not available. I would say they're lost, they became tamei. So we go according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that in any event we'll bring the shtei alechem without the kvasim. Even though you had tenufa, and tenufa really links up the kvasim with the shtei alechem. Now that shita of Rabbi Akiva is rejected by Rav Shimon ben Nanas and Rav Shimon bar Yochai. They hold that you can't bring the shtei alechem. Now, in the shita of Rabbi Akiva, that the shtei alechem are brought to the mizbeach, what exactly happens with them? According to one man diomar, which I believe we had back on Daf Memhei or so, Rabbi Akiva means to say that we discard it, we burn it. But there's one man diomar says it's eaten by the Kohen. So our Mishnah is coming to exclude that case of Rabbi Akiva's shita of shtei alechem abam fnei atzman to say that it's not eaten by a kohen. Kamash malon debazu yafe koach hakohanim liolam. All right, this leads us to the next Mishnah. Kol hamenachos hanasos bikli. Right, and now we're excluding what's called a minchas mafeh. And we're holding that the tanur, the oven in which the minchas mafeh is baked, is not a kli shares, but all the other menachos are made in a kli shares. and to unos shlosha matanos shemen yitzika ubelila umatan shemen bekli kodem. So for some strange reason, the Mishnah gives us the three stages in the reverse order. So every mincha whose procedure is done in a kli shares, as opposed to the minchas mafeh, requires three different, looking for a word here, three different processes, if there is such a word. Oh, he calls it three installments. Okay. Now, the Mishnah lists them in the reverse order. This is Rashi Shita here. First, we have Matan Shemen Bikli, which is listed at the end of this list. And what we do is we pour the oil into a kli sharis and we add kemach, we add flour. Then, again, this is a Mishnah we had back on Daf, I think it was Nun Hey, but anyway, we add warm water and we do a process of lisha, of kneading all this together, the oil with the flour and the warm water. That's the first installment. Number two, we add more shemen and we do blila. So the blila that's mentioned here in the Mishnah is the second stage in which we add shemen. Then we get to the third stage, which is called yitzika in the language of the Mishnah, and whatever oil is left, we pour it in. So that's the shita of Rashi, that this whole process of adding water, which is called in Rashi's understanding of the Mishnah Matan Shemen V'Kli, and we do, after we add the water, we do a lisha, we do a kneading, and that's all before blila, before we mix it together. The Rambam has a different shita, and the blila is done with raw flour and the water is added later. Okay, fine. Now, according to Rashi, and Tosfos apparently agrees, water is added even to a minchas solis, which is a mincha made of fine flour. So that means that once you add the water, the kmitza is going to be done on what we call an isa, dough, not raw flour. And apparently, this is not necessarily the accepted view of everyone. Anyway, there's a long, long presentation with great detail about the next paragraph in the Mishnah, which records machlokas between Rebbe and the Chachamim. So I just don't know if we'll have time to go through all the details. This is one of these sugyas where you need a chart. Maybe, Steve, you'll find a chart for me online or so. And it says the following. According to Rebbe, chalos bolalon. Right? So what do? We mixed the flour together with the oil and we did a blila. And that's chalos, right? Because we're talking about minchas mafeh, which are either chalos or rikikin. So in the case of chalos, so we mix the oil into the mincha only after they already are chalos. That's Rebbe. Chachamim omrim solis. You mix the oil when there's still flour. So it's going to be baked after it's already a dough because you mixed the oil into the flour. According to Rebbe, on the other hand, when you make these chalos, you don't mix the oil into the flour to make a dough. So according to Rebbe, we start with matan shemen bekli, then we add the flour, we add the lukewarm water, we do the kneading, and then the dough is fried either in a machvas or a maseches, and the fried loaf is broken into pieces. That's called psisa, and then we add a second portion of oil, which is called blila, and the remaining oil is called yitzika. However, according to the Chachamim of Rebbe, the second portion of the oil is mixed in, and maybe you add the water and you do the kneading. The dough is fried in a machvas or a marcheshes. Then, when the fried loaf is broken into pieces, that's called psisa. All the remaining oil is poured, and that's called yitzika. Okay, now we talk about rikikin. Right, chalos tunos blila, but rikikin meshicha. So rikikin means that we add the oil on top and we smear it on top. Ketzad moshkin, kimin ki. Okay, here we have machlokas what ki is. According to one opinion, ki is actually a chaf yevanis. However, there's a Ksav of Rashi that says that no, it's something that looks like a tes. There's no Greek letter that looks like a tes. But when you spread the thumb and the index finger, it resembles the lowercase form of the 20th letter of the Greek alphabet called upsilon, which is written like a U. So in contrast to the chalos, which are broken up and then mixed with oil, the rakikin have oil smeared on their surface while they are still whole. And that means that the rakikin are smeared with oil after they've been baked. And the Mishnah concludes and says, Vashar necholim lekohanim. Right? The rest of the oil is consumed by the kohen. So there's a relatively small amount of oil required for Mashicha, and therefore oil will be left over. The remainder is awarded to the kohen. Gemara says lemute mai, right? It says all the menachos that are prepared in a vessel require the oil added. Is amra papal lemute minchas mafe, right? Because the case of minchas mafe, there's no kli sharis. They're not prepared in a vessel. Of course, we're holding now that the tanur is not a kli sharis. Tanur Rabbanu we learned in a brisa, and now we want to get a scriptural basis for all these different installments, what he called. And the pasuk says, "V'minchas marcheshes karbonecha soles b'shemen te'aseh melamed sheteuna matan shemen b'kli." That was the first of the installments, and we add the oil and the flour. Then it says karbonecha l'gzeira shava. And what is this gzeira shava going to teach us? Ma kan matan shemen b'kli. Right, in the case of Minchas Marcheshes, the Torah says that you add the oil into the kli. Aflahalan in the Minchas Machvas, matan shemen bekli. Malahalan yitzika ubelila. Just like in the cases of Minchas Marcheshes, the Torah requires both yitzika and belila. Afkan yitzika ubelila. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop for today. And